Welcome to the introductory class of beginning rod building presented by Nebraska Game and Parks and the Omaha program, Project Healing Waters. My name is John Wright, and I'm the program lead for Project Healing Waters in Omaha. And I'm going to talk to you for just a little bit about the rod building class that Game and Parks and Project Healing Waters are conducting starting on the 11th of January. Classes themselves will be held, as I said, on the 11th of January, and starting on the 11th of January. And for the Game and Parks, the class will be held at the Outdoor Center on Superior Street on the 11th at about 6 o'clock at night. For Project Healing Waters, we will have our first meeting on the 14th of January at 3 o'clock in the afternoon. Nebraska Game and Parks will be conducting 7 sessions, and Project Healing Waters will conduct 5 sessions. Now, with that few number of sessions, there's no way you're going to complete your rod in just using class time. So you're going to have to plan on doing some of the rod building at your home. Okay? So all that having been said, what is it that you're going to build? I mean, what rod do you want to build? So let's talk about that for just a minute. Let's talk about the design. What rod should I build? Good question. And that's the question that is usually on the forefront of most people's mind when they start a rod building class. Well, let me sum that up by saying that you need to build a rod that you're going to use. And the rod you're going to use is going to be dependent upon the kind of fish you're going to fish for, where you're going to fish, and that sort of thing. So if you're right here in the Midwest, in the Omaha area, Omaha-Lincoln area, then you're probably fishing for bluegill and crappie and bass and maybe some silver perch or maybe even a striper or two if you get out to some of the areas. These are relatively small fish when compared to salmon and steelhead and tarpon and that sort of thing. And you can, most of us use a 5-weight rod, a 9-foot 5-weight for this kind of fishing here in Nebraska. In fact, that rod is a pretty good selection for just about any freshwater fish in the continental United States, with the exception of possibly a salmon or a steelhead. You may want to go with a little heavier rod for that kind of fish. So, well, so what do we mean by weight or heavy rod, or what does that mean exactly? Well, we talk about the weight, the rod weight, but we're really not talking about the weight of the rod. What we're talking about is the characteristics of the line that the rod is designed to cast. And we're talking about the weight of the line, if you will. So let's take a look at some line weights. You can see here by this chart that the lines starting with a 1 weight going up to 15. The first 30 feet of line have these weights. So you can see it's 60 grains at 1 weight up to 550 on a 15 weight. So the line weight is what we're talking about when we talk about a rod that's designed, or a 5-weight rod or an 8-weight rod. Now, that equates to the weights that you are probably more familiar with when you use a spinning rod or a casting rod. And you look on the butt section, you can see that they're designed for certain lures, certain weights of lures. With a 64th of an ounce, a 32nd of an ounce, a 2 ounce, etc., etc. Well, the weight of a fly line is very much equivalent to that. Whereas with a spinning rod or a casting rod, you're casting a relatively heavy terminal tackle, a 34th an ounce or an ounce. With a fly rod, your terminal tackle weighs virtually nothing, maybe a couple tenths of an ounce or a couple of hundredths of an ounce. So what we're talking about here is when you cast a fly, you're actually casting the line, not the fly itself. So the weight comes from the line, and hence the term fly line weight or fly rod weight. So, and for most of the stuff you're going to be doing here in Nebraska, a 9-foot 5 weight will be just fine for what you want to do. Length, like I say, 9 foot is usually the pretty standard weight. Now, if you're getting into some areas with a lot of overgrowth and trees and everything, you may want to get a little bit shorter rod. But for most situations in the lower 48, 9-foot 5 weight will work just fine. So let's talk about the action of a rod, which is the third characteristic. And you can see there's three from this highlighted section here: fast, medium, and slow. Some people refer to it as fast, fast, medium, and slow. What we're talking about here is the amount of time it takes the rod to recover from its bent or flexed position. A fast rod will recover quicker than a slow rod. Fast rods, as we say here, will give you a longer cast, but they're also harder to use, so there's trade-offs there. My recommendation is use a medium or a moderate to slow rod for beginners, and a fast rod if you're a little bit more advanced. So when you get ready to go buy your rod, to take those three characteristics into consideration to decide just exactly which rod you want to build, and then you can go either buy a kit or buy the components. And here's what we mean by action. You can kind of see they're fast on the left to slow on the right. Okay, so how are you going to choose? Well, we've already decided that which rod you're going to build. Say, for example, a 5 weight 9 foot. Now you got a choice. Do you want to buy a kit or do you want to get components? What I highly recommend for a first-time builder is to buy a kit from a supplier like Mudhole, Hook and Hackle, Yale Fly Shop down in Florida and the Keys. It's much easier because the kits have everything in them that you will need to build the rod, with a few exceptions. But more importantly, everything in that kit is specifically measured and designed to go with everything else in the kit. You won't have to worry about the size of your tip top, or if you've got the right number of guides, or if the guides are the right size, or et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, on and on infinitum. Depending upon what you're willing to spend, you can get a higher quality kit or a lower quality kit. As an example, the last time I went out to Mudhole, this has been a few years now, for a 9 foot 5 weight rod, they had over 100 different kits available, and they ranged in price for everything from $100 up to $300. Obviously, the more you spend, the higher the quality is, or at least the higher the quality that the manufacturer thinks he's providing you anyway. I will say this, though, and most rod builders will tell you the same thing, that the rod you build will perform every bit as well, if not better than, a rod that you would spend twice as much as you did for your kit. So, and that's because we're going to spend a lot of time tuning the rod. We're going to make sure everything fits together the way the designer meant it to fit together. All right? Okay. So let's say you decide instead to get a component. Okay, you want to buy each thing individually. Well, let me show you what you're going to have to do. You're going to have to buy the blank. And now you've got to decide what kind of blank do you want. Not only do you have to decide the length and the weight, but now you've got all the different manufacturers that are making blanks. And you can buy them from different people. So you've probably got 200 or 300 options there. The guides, there are as many different size and style guides as you can believe. And even within the certain category of guides, there different manufacturers have different quality of guides. So now you got to figure those out. The tip top, what size tip top do you need? What quality of tip top? Do you want a big loop or a small loop? Et cetera, et cetera. The reel seat. Do you want a carbon fiber reel seat? Do you want a wooden reel seat? Do you want a skeleton seat? What exactly kind of seat do you want? The handle, all right? Traditionally, we use a cork handle, but you don't have to. There's all kinds of different handles that you can buy, and now you have to make that decision yourself. Excuse me. Again, I highly recommend buying a kit and not going with the components. All right, whether you buy a kit or whether you buy components, you're going to have to get some additional items. You're going to have to get thread. And what you want to do here is you want to choose a color or a color combination based on your likes and your desires for your thread. You have to decide what color thread you want. You have to decide if you want to put some trim bands on it, in which case you're going to have to buy a spool of thread for the main color and then another spool of thread for the trim. You're going to have to buy some epoxy. Now, this is just standard 5-minute epoxy that we're going to use to secure the reel seat and the handle to the rod blank. Ferrule cement. Now, ferrule cement is what we use to secure the tip top to the blank, and you can spend a lot of money with actually get ferrule cement, or you can just use hot glue. I've been using hot glue for years, and it works just fine. Color preserver. You want to use color preserver on your wraps to keep the colors true. If you don't, some threads will allow the color of the blank to bleed through, and your colors will get washed out. So use color preserver. It also protects the wraps while you're working on the rod and before you get a chance to put your wrap covering on it. The wrap covering, there's two kinds today, two kinds of coverings, epoxy or rod varnish. The epoxy is not the 5-minute epoxy we were talking about before. This is a special type of epoxy that's made specifically for rod building, and it's a little bit pricey, but it's not all that bad, and you can get it individual packets of part A and part B, so that you can, which gives you enough to basically cover one set of guides. So if you're going to put 2 coats on, you'll need two different sets of the epoxy like that. Or you can use rod varnish. Now, before we had epoxy, we all used rod varnish to complete our wraps. There are some advantages and disadvantages to rod varnish, and either Larry or I will talk about it when we get to the final couple of weeks of the build process and talk about how we're going to finish our wraps with either epoxy or rod varnish. Well, now's the time before you had done the ordering and anything to choose your colors, your decorative wraps, what you want to do. So sit down, think about it, go out on the internet, look around at examples, what others have done. Go to Cabela's, look at some of the rods that are in their racks there, and get some ideas of what can be done. And choose your colors for your rods. Okay. Now, one thing I want to cover before we get done here is I want to get rid of that. Let me go back to the first slide so you get my numbers and everything. There we go. One of the things that you need to understand is that this is not a craft class, all right? We're not going to be cutting out things and pasting them. There is a skill level involved in building a fly rod, and it's a skill level that you're going to have to acquire by practice. You're also going to have to be familiar with some tools. You're going to have to be comfortable using a drill. We're going to have to use a drill to ream out the cork handle so it fits on the rod blank. You're going to need to be comfortable with using a small file. We're going to be using the file to prepare the guides so they fit properly on your rod. And you're going to have to be patient, because one of the most challenging parts of building a fly rod or any rod is tying the guides onto the blank. It is a very frustrating and very time-consuming process to learn, And it does take a while, and it takes some time, and it takes some patience to learn that skill set. So be ready to tie your guides on 1 or 2 times. You will probably not be satisfied with your guides the first time you do it. Be ready to go back and start all over again. How good the rod looks is going to for a large portion is going to depend upon the amount of time you spend with the rod and how much time you spend building it. Bottom line, though, is that you get out of it what you put into it. It's just like any other endeavor. So be ready to do a lot of work especially for your first build. Be ready to be a little bit frustrated at times because you can't get it right, but trust me, we've all been there. We've all had the same experiences. We all lived through it, and we've all figured out how to do it so that we can build a fairly good looking rod that performs better than any you could buy on the open market. So with all that said, you'll be able to sign up for this class. If you're in Healing Waters, you've already done it. But if you're in Lincoln, I think you can go out to the Game and Parks website, and there will be or should be a place out there where you can sign up for the class. If not, give me a call or drop me a line, and I will get a hold of Larry Pape and get you the information. So, all right, until January 11th or January 14th, good luck with your design. Again, if you have any questions, give me a call, drop me a line, and we'll work through them. Thanks, and have a good rest of the day.